Da, 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 da. Let's do this. Da, 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 da.
Most people in barbecue world swear by the mantra low and slow. So a low temperature for a long period of time.
Uh-huh.
But I was telling you about the guy who opened the restaurant's Q39, who's actually a CIA graduate.
Uh-huh.
He does
Which
hot
for the
faster.
for the rest of you guys, because for a lot of people, CIA is
He's not a CIA like Central Intelligence Agency. He's the Culinary Institute of America.
Now the CIA of my world is the Culinary Institute of America. So
right.
for everybody's head who doesn't go to the Culinary Institute, there's your translation.
That's exactly right. Because I don't think you can leave the CIA, the other CIA. I think once you're in that, you're in that. You know, you don't graduate from it. You don't put on a toque and start smoking meat.
So yet another reason why the Culinary Institute is a better institution to choose to enter than
certainly less of a commitment.
So Dave, I don't know if you can see Paul, but he's in the vineyard, and that's a little different look than when you were in the vineyard.
I'll tell you what, I will never forget that day. So you will be forever indelibly placed in my brain. That was the coldest I've ever been in a vineyard in my life. And that includes Ontario in the winter. So I can't remember, my wife will correct me, but there's a famous line about San Francisco that the coldest winter I ever spent was summer in San Francisco.
Uh-huh.
I kind of felt that way when I was in the DeBrule vineyard with the 45-mile-an-hour winds. That was
it was a little breezy that day, that's all.
That was just a tad. Yeah, just a little slight breeze coming in.
Oh, Mary's joining us, who was there that day as well. Super fun.
And David was there.
And David was not there, right? David, you skipped Steve Warner brought the other trip. You missed the DeBrule Vineyard trip that was.
Yeah.
It was
this is this David you're talking to. We need to do the Dave E and the Dave F, like I'm back in elementary school. But that was, I think you guys had the PLCB buyers from Pennsylvania in on the same day.
Yes. They were in from Pennsylvania. I remember that.
Correct.
We kept running into them at various stops along the way.
They had short sleeves on.
Okay, so
it's the desert, right?
We should do a quick round of introductions here. So for those of you guys who do not know Dave E. Eckert, our barbecue expert extraordinaire, we first met Dave on a media tour, which Mary was on as well, and she's listening in.
Mary's on.
To the vineyard on,
Hi, Mary.
on like a memorable day before Taste Washington, and David Flaherty, Dave F for fun and confusion, is part of the wine commission who organizes some of these tours, and he's actually going to be speaking next week, but he wanted to come and say hi and apparently have an excuse to drink a beer. So
I put DeBrule Cabernet in a beer can. So this is Côte Bonneville 2009.
Actually, the fact that it's Reuben's means you are supporting Côte Bonneville, because we have a project with Reuben's. They've got some barrels from us, and
that's so cool.
They're doing some collaborative brewing, which is. They send me beer during harvest. I love Reuben's.
I would love to try that beer. Keep me posted.
So it's kind of close.
Yeah.
Well, I've had many winemakers tell me that it takes a lot of beer to make great wine.
That is a true statement.
True. Yeah.
True statement. And you know, the funny thing is, all the hop growers say it takes a lot of wine to grow
Good hops.
So, since we met in the vineyard and it's part of our thing, we're gonna let Dad talk for a second. If I can get you unmuted. There you go. Dad.
Can you hear me?
I can. You want to give us I will show the Syrah, and you can give us our vineyard update.
Well, first of all, you're going to introduce Dave a little bit more, what his background is?
I'm going to let him introduce himself.
Oh, okay. Okay, well, I'll introduce myself. I'm the grower, and we've had blistering heat for several weeks. So we are working like crazy to keep these vines healthy. The focus, of course, first of all, is the clusters. And you can see the clusters of the Syrah vine are pretty well defined. They are still green. They have not started veraison yet. And the difference in the shape of the berries compared to Cab and the shape of the clusters is something that was addressed by Andy, and maybe Carrie will comment. But the significant thing for me as the grower is at the upper left, you can see those tender shoots with some tendrils. In spite of the heat, we have been watering 7 days a week, which in the 30 years of DeBrule, I cannot remember watering 7 days a week to make sure everything is well hydrated. We got 104 today. We're supposed to go to 110 tomorrow. And so that's really stressing the vines, but we're working to keep them well hydrated. And then on the Cabernet, that'd be the next picture. Again, you can see the clusters, see the openness of the canopy. I'm looking at the morning side of the vine right now. The afternoon sun has got a little more cover than the leaf exposure we have on the morning side. Again, top center, you see that shoot that's got new growth. And so we are working like crazy to keep these vines with just a little bit of newness in spite of this extreme heat. We started out with a dry spring and things were chugging along pretty steadily, and then this heat adds to the promise that we're going to have some spectacular wines, especially Cabernet. Cabernet just seems to really like this year, and so hang on to your hats for what's coming out of the barrels.
And the berries are still really small, and we've got so we're holding out, hope for that red label Cabernet, but we'll keep you guys posted. No promises at this point. It's too early. So, do we have any other vineyard questions? Anybody have any good tips on how to stay hydrated?
I have a question, Carrie.
Yeah.
Is it common to be this hot? I mean, in the hundreds, is that fairly common, a common occurrence?
Not this hot, and the thing that's unique really is we've had kind of a coolish spring, so it was cool, and then all of a sudden, it was supposed to be like 107. 107's hot for us. We usually get a couple days in the triple digits, but not for a full week, and not. The good thing is, even if it's 107, the lows are still like 50, right. 60. So we still
have that diurnal swing that's really great.
Yeah, it's really.
But from the standpoint of this season, this is 3 weeks of 100-degree temps already, and that's very unusual for us.
But I would think better now than, say, later, where you could get sugar spikes like they often get in Sonoma, Napa, where the sugars go way high very rapidly, and yet the grapes aren't quite mature yet.
We don't generally have those problems, because even if the only time that we'd have those kind of spikes is at the end of August. Mm-hmm. It stays warmer longer in California, so you can get much more heat into September and more. Holy cow, 120 tomorrow. It's not that hot here. In Palm Springs. I'm feeling cooler already. Thanks for sharing that, right? Yeah.
Moving to the sun.
Yes, we don't have that problem, and we don't have it in late August, early September. Once you get into September and past Labor Day, we get more into Indian summer kind of temperatures, mm-hmm. where in warmer climates you get more of that kind of heat, extended heat that's significantly warmer. It's one of the things that it really differentiates Washington and the Yakima Valley as a moderate climate instead of a hot or a cool, because we don't have a lot of those really hot issues that you get in warm climates like the Australias and like the Californias and places like that. So, you can, especially in warmer sites, but again, that diurnal temperature shift. And then when the days start getting shorter, that's the other thing that's really different about Washington versus California, is when your days start getting shorter and your nighttime temperatures are cooler, it means your overall temperature really drops down, and we generally get flavor development and sugar accumulation that pair they go pretty well together.
Can I ask
your
a quick
September
question?
weather? Your September weather is more like their October weather.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
It's also not hot all day. I mean, it doesn't start heating up until the afternoon, and then actually 5, 6 o'clock at night, but then it starts cooling down again. So it is hot, but it's not like in the South when you wake up and your alarm says it's 100 degrees and 100% humidity.
That's here.
Yeah, we don't have that. I mean, we actually still sleep under a blanket with the window open.
Oh my goodness.
Under 5 during the day, and you know, it's a little, it's not that, it's doable.
Yeah. So Flaherty, did you have a question?
Yeah, I did. Hugh, it's awesome to see you. Kathy, Carrie, this is so fun. Hugh, I wanted to ask you, I mean, you know, I think all of us on this call, we've all seen lots of pictures of vineyards. We've all been in many vineyards, some more than others, but I'm fascinated by the fact that you've been in the same vineyard for decades, right? Like, you know, if you're
30 years.
you're like a concert.
Just yesterday.
Yeah, if you're like a concert violinist and you go and watch an orchestra play, that concert violinist is listening and looking at totally different things than we are. I'm just curious, when you walk into that vineyard, like, what are you looking at? What are you looking for? Like, where does your eye go? Like, what are you seeing that we're not?
Okay, well, David, when we started this and we started to do the vineyard updates, we selected 2 vines, and we picked one Syrah vine, one Cab vine, and we have taken a weekly update of the same shoots every single week of those vines and gone week to week to week to week. And we're trying to highlight the things that I look at and as we go along the growing season. And I've had questions that I've tried to answer. And what I've tried to do is highlight the things that are most significant when I look at the vines. And so the average person's going to look at the clusters and say, okay, they haven't started integration. But what I'm looking at is with this intense heat for weeks at a time, the hydration status of the vines. If I can get a little bit of shoot tip growth, then I have got those vines exactly pitched to the tune that we want them. If their leaves are yellow and there's no new growth and the leaves feel crummy, then I'm way behind. But just the shoot tips show, okay, I'm getting the job done in spite of the heat. Does that help?
Yeah, that's interesting. Thank you.
Well, and if you want to go back and look at what we were thinking about at other parts of the season, we always do it at the beginning of happy hour, and they're all on YouTube, except last week I haven't posted yet. And I also do the IGTV minute every Friday. I follow the cab vine that is adjacent to the cab vine that we're following here. And so we try to make the thought process a little more visible.
Mary, question.
Transparent.
Yeah. Mary, what's your question?
So I'm wondering, how many days can the vine sustain the heat at above a certain 100-degree point before there's real damage to the crop?
It depends
on the basic concept is that over 95 degrees, the vines shut down and they stop metabolizing to a significant degree, and you don't get leaf development. You don't get those shoots still pushing a little bit at the tips. And so with us giving them more water depending on each, and we walk the different blocks, we walk into the blocks and see how the vines are doing to make these irrigation decisions day to day to day and decide to keep pouring the water to them. And so the fact that we have those little bit of shoot tip growth tells me that, again, I'm getting them taken care of to the point where they're happy.
Okay.
All right. Well, you guys ready to talk about barbecue?
You better mute me.
Yes. Well, Dave, if it makes you feel better, you're not the only person who has tech support, and I'm Dad's tech support to
Cool.
mute him and unmute him. So,
Well, I just wrapped up my Instagram Live, so I was running down from my office to come down here and get set up and played all the barbecue and everything. So it was a bit chaotic, but we made it.
well, perfect. I'll have to go back and watch that later. So, all right. So I hear you've got all sorts of history of barbecue, of Kansas City barbecue. You worked with a couple different people to get all that food in front of you. Well, first of all, tell us about yourself and how you became such a barbecue expert.
I'm more of a barbecue aficionado than I am an expert. I became an expert or an aficionado just by living here. I've been in Kansas City over 2 periods of time, more than 20, I think it's almost 25 years now. And so you just become indoctrinated into the barbecue culture here. I was telling you today when we spoke, I moved here initially in 1989 and took a job at the ABC affiliate as an anchor and a reporter. And on that day that I came for my interview, the news director and the general manager took me to the most famous barbecue restaurant in town called Arthur Bryant's. And it was my first exposure to true, authentic barbecue. I grew up in Chicago, and Chicago has great barbecue now, but back then, not so great. My definition of barbecue back then growing up was Carson's, the place for ribs, and that meant big slabs of ribs that were boiled and then slathered in sauce and thrown in the oven. That was my definition and their definition of barbecue. I had never had true closed pit, low and slow barbecue until I came to Kansas City. Within 6 months of being at the station, I was invited to judge a barbecue contest. I judged that on a rainy, cloudy, cool day in April in a suburb called Blue Springs. It was the Blue Springs Blaze Off. I don't even think they have that contest anymore, but I was hooked. And after that, I got involved in more contests and more judging, got to know some of the people who competed in those contests, and then it just grew from there. When I got up to Chicago and left WGN and started my own food, wine, and travel show, I became even more immersed into the world of food, wine, travel, hospitality, and barbecue was a big part of that.
Awesome. So what do you have in front of you?
Well, I'll talk about this in a second. Let me take you back a little bit and give you a little history of Kansas City barbecue and sort of how we got to where we are now. Kansas City is considered by many to be the real hub of American barbecue. I know Texans would argue with that. I know people in Memphis would argue with that. And I know folks in the Carolinas might argue with that. But the thing that really makes Kansas City barbecue special is if it moves, if it walks, if it trots, if it oinks, if it it doesn't matter what it is, we will smoke it. And we will put a dry rub on it, and we might serve some sauce on the side or not, but we will definitely smoke it and offer it to you. In Texas, they're all about beef. In Memphis, they're all about pork, mainly pork that has been dry rubbed a couple times. In the Carolinas, they're all about pork with a vinegar type sauce, a pulled pork with a vinegar type sauce. In Kansas City, we don't discriminate. We have barbecue for everyone. And if I just warn all the animals out there, stay away, because if we catch you, we're going to throw you out of the pit. And I don't care if you're a squirrel or a possum or a raccoon. I'll stop shy of dog and cat, but it wouldn't surprise me. But honestly, ham, pork, chicken, what am I missing? Ribs, beef, it's all fair game in Kansas City. And it started many, many years ago, before the 1940s, with a gentleman by the name of Henry Perry. And he started in a little area just outside of downtown called the Garment District. And he sold smoked meat wrapped in paper for 25 cents. So that was the origins of Kansas City barbecue. He then moved to the famous 18th and Vine Jazz District and opened up a formal restaurant that was actually in a streetcar barn. He trained Charlie Bryant. Remember I talked about going to Arthur Bryant's restaurant? Charlie Bryant was Arthur's older brother. Charlie passed the restaurant down to Arthur. It became wildly, hugely successful and still is to this day. In fact, Calvin Trillin, the famous humorist who writes for The New Yorker, he often describes Arthur Bryant's as his favorite restaurant on the planet. And he said if there's one restaurant he would go to eat at before he died. After that, Gates family opened up a series of restaurants here. They became very, very popular. The idea, as I told you from the beginning, is low and slow. So that's a closed pit, not an open pit. There are some barbecue restaurants that I've visited around the world, most notably Salt Lick down in Austin, that uses an open pit. This is all closed, and you use different types of wood to extract the different types of flavors and aromas that you want in the meat. The primary wood for more heartier meats like beef, brisket, is hickory. But if you're going to smoke chicken or pork, I prefer a lighter wood like a pecan or an apple or a cherry. And how long you smoke it and at what temperature you smoke it, it all impacts what the final product is.
And then your wine pairings as well.
And then your wine pairings. Well, I was one of the first crazy ones to say when I got here, hey, wine goes great with barbecue. And I was met with snickers. No, it's beer. You just have a cold beer. Well, a cold beer and barbecue is great. But as you guys both know, wine, there's a wine for every type of cuisine. And wine is meant to enhance cuisine regardless of what it is. So I made it kind of my life's duty, my mission, to figure out in a very non-scientific manner, that is to pop as many corks as I could and try it with as many different types of barbecue as I could, what wine went best with barbecue, because you got several factors going here. You got the smoke, you got the spice, you've got the sauce if you're using sauce, and you've got the rub. A lot of wines I find that are higher in alcohol and higher in tannin really don't work very well with barbecue, because the barbecue dries them out and makes them very kind of alcoholic, and they lose a lot of their fruit. So I think your Syrah, I'm sorry that the bottle didn't arrive in time, but I think that's a perfect example of a wine that works well with a wide range of barbecue, but especially heartier examples like the ribs or the brisket. One of my favorites is rosé. I love a dry rosé with barbecue because it has enough fruit to handle the spice and the smoke and enough acidity to cut through the fat. And plus, like you experience 100-degree days, here in the summer, it's also often 95 to 100 degrees. And it's pretty tough sometimes to drink a great big, 16.5% Zinfandel when you're having your barbecue. I have many friends who will do it, but I would prefer a nice chilled rosé. Plus, you can drink a little bit more of it too.
Which is always a bonus.
Always. As long as you're driving responsibly or you're sitting at home, which is what most of us are doing now.
Which is okay. You still want to wake up the next morning feeling good, and you still
it's perfectly okay. So I'm going to try to show you, and you've got to tell me if you can. I'll try to hold it up to the camera a little bit. I asked two of my friends to help here. On the right-hand side, we have stuff from my good friend Stephanie Wilson, who is the pitmaster for the Slabs Barbecue, who just does wonderful barbecue and honestly my favorite rubs, glazes, and sauces on the planet. I am addicted to those. I use them on everything from chicken, pork, beef, ribs, French fries, eggs, you name it. So she did this incredible spare ribs. Can you see those?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so she smoked those. I don't know how long. I saw her post that she's putting on. They probably went a good 4 or 5 hours. And then she finished them with her amazing glaze, which is this finishing sauce that she uses. And that it's sweet, but it really just makes them perk up. Then she did chicken wings.
Oh, yeah.
And those aren't your average chicken wings, because she just told me that she uses a pepper-infused honey in the sauce and the marinade. And so I took a little tiny bite. You have no idea how hard it is to sit here with all this barbecue in front of me and not eat. It would be like if there were an open bottle of wine in front of me. I would be drinking that bottle of wine. So those are smoky, sweet, and spicy at the same time. So that's the slabs, and you can find all of these rubs, glaze, sauces closer to me.
Yeah, there you go.
There you go.
Yeah.
I sent you the information on the website, but honestly, if you Google the Slabs Barbecue, you'll go right to it, and she ships all over the country. Really wonderful stuff.
For those of you that don't have good barbecue where you are, Dave was kind enough to help us figure out how to get some.
Absolutely. And I have a friend of mine. It's actually a woman that my wife went to high school with who lives down in LA. She has become addicted to the Slabs rub, and she always messages me when she's using it when she's cooking. She does it on chicken, she does it on ribs, she does it on salads, I mean, everything. And she's just this LA gal who's now addicted to this Midwestern rub. So on this side of the aisle, we have food from another competition barbecue team that has opened up their own restaurant chain. They have 3 restaurants now. It's called Plowboys, Plowboys. Todd Johns is the pit master, and he was a competition guy just like Stephanie for many, many years. And they have these 3 restaurants, and so they really wanted to show off. They sent me this box. I took it out of the box because I thought this would be a better presentation. But it's called the Royal Crown Family Box, and it feeds 4. And in that box was the pulled pork, the brisket,
Nice.
and a slab of ribs.
Mm.
I would say conservatively that could feed 6, not 4, but you know, they're very generous here in Kansas City.
And Dave did an unboxing of the barbecue on Instagram. So if you guys ever want food and wine inspiration, or just to know what Dave is eating, or think you cannot eat all those things. It's impossible.
No, please. That makes it look like I'm eating 24/7. I am posting a lot, but I'm not always eating. But yeah, honestly, if you want to, anybody out there wants to follow me at Eats and Drinks with Dave, or give me a friend request on Facebook, I have a lot of great food and wine and spirits and whatnot, shots. They also sent their famous barbecue loaded nachos, which I have not tried yet, but you have that recipe that I sent to you, so I think people can get that. This is called the Rib Recovery Sandwich. The Rib Recovery? Recovery Rib Sandwich. So it's like a half slab of ribs on a bun. I don't know why you would put a half slab of ribs on a bun, but people swear by it. And then, last, but certainly not least, this is what Kansas City is really famous for. These are burnt ends. They were created here. Burnt ends come from the point or the fattiest side of the brisket. You know, the brisket's about yay big. One side is the flat, that's very lean. The other side is kind of bulgy, and it's called the point, and that's where a lot of the fat is. So that's where you get the really, really moist portion of the brisket. Way back in the day, when the pit masters would be smoking their barbecue, little portions of that point end would kind of char and burn. And so they would cut those off and just give them to the crowd for free. Well, those became what was known as burnt ends. Obviously, you can't do that in a commercial manner these days. So what people do is they smoke the point end of the brisket. They then cut them up into cubes, as these are, generally sauce them, and then put them back in the smoker. And what happens the second time they're in the smoker is really magic. It's really alchemy. They caramelize, the sauce caramelizes, and it seals in the moisture inside the meat. So they're little, meaty, moist, delicious cubes. And they are the most sought after barbecue item in Kansas City. Anytime you have a restaurant that offers burnt ends as a special, you know they're going to sell out. I actually did my version. This is the only thing that's actually mine here. These are pork burnt ends. So I took a pork butt, removed the bone, slabbed it up with some really nice rub, put it on the smoker, let it go for about 4 hours, cut it up into cubes, put some of Stephanie's sauce on it, put it back in the smoker, and took it out after about an hour. It was my first time trying them, and if I do say so myself, they're PDT, pretty damn tasty.
Okay, so we've got a couple questions.
Yes.
One of them, what is the most exotic meat you've ever had barbecued? Possum, squirrel, mice?
Never had mice. Exotic meat I've ever had smoked. I've eaten a lot of exotic meat, but I don't know that any of it was actually smoked. I mean, I've had bear and, you know, elk and things of that nature, but never smoked. I honestly can't say that I've had anything that was truly weird. The weirdest thing I've ever eaten in my life, this does not relate to barbecue, but, you know, I did a food, wine, and travel television show called Culinary Travels with Dave Eckert for 11 seasons that aired on PBS and then cable. And so I traveled all over. I did 275 shows on 6 continents. And I was doing a show in Guadalajara, and we were at the Mercado Central, and I was with an interpreter, and we were going through the meat section. And there was a little container sitting on top of the countertop, and it just had little cubes of something in there with toothpicks. And I said, Fernando, what is that? And he went over and talked to the butcher, and he and the butcher had a good laugh, and he came back over, and we were rolling. We were on camera at that time. And he said, is a bull's penis ceviche. And I said, okay. And I was determined not to eat that, because my goal when I did my show was not to go around and eat weird stuff like, you know, AZ, but actually just get what's local and indigenous. But lo and behold, Fernando takes a piece of this, sticks it in his mouth, and eats it on camera. I'm the host. So what am I supposed to do? I got to eat this now, right? So I put one of this bull's penis ceviche pieces in my mouth, and I'm chewing it, and it's chewy. Could have used a little low and slow on that ceviche, I'll tell you. So I'm chewing it, and I looked at the camera, and I'm trying to describe it and say, well, you could tell the citrus influence of the ceviche, and it's, you know, and then I just went, and spit it out on camera. The single grossest thing I have ever eaten in my life. And people ask me to this day when I tell the story, so what did it taste like? I can't tell you what it tasted like, but I can tell you the texture to me was like a nose. It was like eating cartilage. It was, and I kept picturing the poor bull, you know? I'm chewing on this hunk of penis thinking, this poor bull has lived and died for this. You know? I don't know. That was bad. That was really bad. Almost as bad as the black tofu that I had in Shanghai. That was so disgusting and smelly that we had to open the windows in order to finish lunch. Anyway, I digress. I apologize. I wish I had a really gross or weird exotic animal to say that I've eaten smoked. I have tasted squirrel, but again, not smoked. There's actually a squirrel contest down in Northwest Arkansas that a local team goes down and competes every year. A couple of years ago, they won it. And I'm like, hey, you put that on the resume, huh? You know, you're applying at the CIA. Hold it together, ladies.
Barbecue.
Yes, back to barbecue.
Back to barbecue.
Ask that question.
I need another glass of wine.
I asked that question, and he said he's had porcupine. So
Pork what?
porcupine.
Porcupine. Okay. I could, you know, almost any animal I would think can be smoked, and porcupine is going to have a nice layer of fat to it. So the thing is, getting to the meat is going to be difficult, right?
You got to get past the quills and that.
You got to get past the quills. Exactly right.
Okay.
So I'd take a knitter with me, you know. So get somebody who's really experienced with quills, or an old timey writer.
Okay, so then while we're smoking our porcupine,
Yes.
what in Kansas City, if everything
The question is, what kind of rub would you use on your porcupine too?
so then Tony says, what do you mean by a closed pit? Is it like enclosed? Is there coals and wood all over the thing? Talk about the difference between closed and open pits.
Okay, well, an open pit is just that. So it would be almost like a grill that is uncovered. So you would put your coals and your wood in the pit, and there would be nothing to seal it. A closed pit is generally speaking, is upright with two doors that open like this, and then racks that stack. Like I have a very small barbecue. I don't even know what to call it. It's just an electric. It's an electric smoker, and it's only about maybe 4 feet high, but it's really all I need. You know, I'm not smoking for competitions or many thousands of pounds of meat. In the big commercial establishments, they have gigantic smokers with doors that close, and that seals everything in. So it seals in the smoke, it seals in the heat, and you build your fire in a firebox, and then you replenish it as is necessary for how long that meat is on the smoker, and how long you need the wood. You can let it go without the wood, but then you're just cooking in a regular oven.
So does it gets more smoke influence then when it's enclosed like that?
Yes, yeah, obviously, because if you have an open pit, a lot of that smoke is just dissipating. It's just going straight up into the air. Not that I mentioned Salt Lick. It's a very famous barbecue place in Austin, and their barbecue is wonderful, but they have a very big open pit. I think the other thing is you got to feed a lot more charcoal and wood into that because it is open to the air, so it's going to burn more quickly.
Okay, so do you have to smoke for a shorter period of time than if it's closed pit?
I don't have enough experience with an open pit situation, but I would think that you do. I would think that you, and also I think it's easier to control the temperature in a closed pit than an open pit. And that's obviously a danger, because I remember I did a segment on my show down at Salt Lick, and I was talking to one of the pit masters, and he said overnight once the fire got too hot and the pit caught on fire and it burned everything that was on the pit, and we're talking about hundreds of pounds of meat. He cleaned it all up, he reloaded it, he put the meat back on, and the next morning the owner came in and said, "Oh, you had a fire, huh?" And he said, "How'd you know that?" He said, "I can just tell. I can tell by the smell. I can tell by the fact that the meat is not done as it should have been because you had to redo it." And so there's a real art, and everybody who has a pit, it's like owning your own set of knives, your own set of tools. You get used to that pit, what temperature to be set at, what kind of wood flavors it will impart, how long the meat needs to go. It's hard to smoke on somebody else's smoker.
All right. So is Salt Lick your favorite barbecue joint in Austin? In Austin, we're clear.
In Austin. I'm glad you clarified that, because that could get me in real trouble. I've only been to 2, so yeah, I like Salt Lick because it has a real old time feel to it, a real nice ambiance. It's kind of outside the city, in the country a little bit. Has some outdoor seatings, a lot of old trees, and yeah, it's a pretty cool place. And I have a hat that I wear when I walk in the park.
There you go. Okay, so going back to the porcupine.
Yes.
Pairings. Let's talk about how, if we like something like Syrah for the bigger, heartier things. I'm not going to pretend to say what would you pair with porcupine, but what about that chicken with the sweet, spicy?
Okay, that's a great question. Having not had this before, I would be taking an educated guess.
Well, taste it.
I actually like your Riesling with that.
That's a good choice.
I think your Riesling would be just about perfect with that, because it's not sweet, but it's ripe, and it has great acidity, and it's just the right weight. With white meat, generally speaking, like pork and chicken, I generally prefer white wine. You could go with lighter reds, like you could go with a Gamay, you could go with a Pinot Noir, you could go with a Dolcetto, something like that. But I find like Rieslings, Pinot Gris, not necessarily Pinot Grigios, because a lot of those can be kind of bubblegummy, but Pinot Gris are really good with that. Pinot Blancs are very nice. Any kind of light to medium-bodied white wine that doesn't have oak. That's one of the things that I like to stay away from when marrying wine and barbecue is wines that are overly oaked, because that really does fight the smoke and the spice and potentially the sauce.
Okay, so we're staying away from heavily oaked wines. We're staying away from high alcohol wines.
High alcohol wines, exactly.
High tannin in general.
Yes, in general.
All right. So what about the rubs and things like that? What other things do you think about?
Okay. So they're really easy to understand and use now because they tell you right on the label. They say beef rub. So I use the beef rub on beef, right? Birds and bones. I use that on chicken and ribs. Perk up your pork. They have fun with the names down here too.
So they put you put the rub on before you put it in the smoker, or after?
Yes, exactly. And a generous amount. I admit, my buddy Stephanie rubs much more vigorously than I do with the amount of rub she puts on, because she's used to cooking competition style, and I'm just cooking at home for, the two of us or the three of us, the four of us, whatever it is. But you want to put a liberal dose of the rub on there on both sides. I like to let it sink in for a little bit. So if you have the time, it's not bad to go ahead and rub it and then stick it in the fridge for an hour or so before you actually put it on the smoker. If you don't have the time, it's not going to make that big of a difference, but I find that it does make a little bit of a difference. And the rub just brings out the flavor, helps bring out the flavor in that meat.
Okay. So some other pairing questions.
Yes.
Carolina Gold mustard sauce, or different kinds of barbecue. What would you pair with Carolina Gold mustard sauce?
She must be a
Pulled pork.
Hmm?
Pulled pork. I would go with pork with that. I think that mustard, any kind of mustard influence or mustard base works best with pork and not necessarily beef. You could do chicken, but it might dominate the chicken a little bit too much.
And then and wine pairing as well?
Ooh, that's hard. Are you asking me with the Carolina Gold mustard and the pork? Oh wow, that's a good one.
Chardonnay.
We have a test here.
I know that's rough. I didn't study on that one. Let me go through my wine Rolodex. I got it. A white Rhone, or something that is influenced by white Rhone varieties. So something that has maybe Marsanne, Roussanne, a little, maybe some Viognier, some, what am I thinking of? Claret Blanc. I don't know, just some weird white Rhone varietals might work really well, because those wines are a little bit oily and a little bit unctuous. And I think that's kind of the texture and weight that you want with the pork. Okay,
what about super spicy, fiery barbecue sauce?
Okay, well then you've got to go for wines that have a little bit of sweetness to them, I think.
So
yeah, you go Riesling, Gewürztraminer, something along those lines. You could go with the rosé, but if I were going to go with the rosé with something that was really super spicy, I think I'd want a Pinot Noir rosé, because it just has more overt fruitiness than traditional Rhone or Provençal style rosés.
Okay.
Hey, I'm going to get up for a quick second and pour another glass of wine. I'll be right back. I'm listening.
Okay. While he's jetting out, I will send the websites, but it's Plowboy. If you Google Plowboys or the slabs, you'll be able to find the rubs and things like that. And I was looking at the slabs the other day. They have a great selection online, and I have the recipe for the nachos, and apparently I have to do a blog post because Sally from last week has more recipes she wanted to share. or she wanted me to share them in a different way. Or so anyway, I've got a whole bunch more recipes now to put on the blog or something. So I will get those out.
And Carrie, I also sent you, even before I sent you the barbecue nachos recipe, I sent you Stephanie's recipe for her ribs. So if you could find that and include that, I'd appreciate that.
For sure. We should have a happy hour cookbook, Scott. You are correct.
Absolutely. That's a great idea.
And
I'll do the wine pairings.
Perfect. We were going to do we had a geologist talk. We were talking about doing a geology tour. Everybody needs to go to France on our cruise next year. I'm adding Kansas City for barbecue on our happy hour field trips. So, okay. So here's another hard question that I'm not surprised Paul asked, because I was going to ask it in fact. So Paul was talking earlier about vegan barbecue. Do you know any? Have you ever had vegan barbecue? What do you think about that? And do you have any recommendations?
I've only had one thing that would, I guess, be considered vegan, and it's at the restaurant I was telling you about earlier today, Joe's Kansas City, that started in a gas station. So they actually do a smoked portobello sandwich. So they take the portobello and dry rub it and then smoke it and serve it. I think with coleslaw. I've never actually had it, but people say that it's very, very good. I also know that some people, I have not seen this on a menu, but some people recommend smoking jackfruit from the Far East, because if it's at the right ripeness, it can't be too ripe and it can't be too unripe. It's got to be right there in the middle. It has a really meaty texture to it that smokes really well. It is replicated in some recipes for pork.
All right.
That's my complete vegan repertoire.
Okay, so question then on the difference between wood or pellet smokers.
Okay. I prefer a wood smoker just because that's what I've always used. But I know a lot of people like the ease of a pellet smoker. I mean, man, you pour them in and you walk away and you're good to go. I also like the selection of wood that you can get when you're using wood as opposed to pellets. Like, I have friends that live out in the country a bit, and they have land, and that land has trees, and those trees sometimes die or they get felled by storms, and suddenly I have a bunch of pear wood that shows up, or a bunch of apple, or some maple, or whatever. And I love having those different things from which to choose that just come from nature. And I also feel good about that. I'm like recycling stuff that's out there and otherwise would just be, put into a compost or a landfill or whatever. So I like that, but I don't have anything negative to say about pellets at all.
Okay. So, if we're not going to order barbecue sauce which if we don't plan ahead enough would be one reason why I got myself in that situation today. If you don't order ahead in enough time to get barbecue sauce, Adrish is asking if do you have any recommended recipes, websites, places to go to make your own?
I have made barbecue sauce a couple, 3 times. It's not all that complicated. I don't know if Stephanie actually has a barbecue sauce recipe, but you can find barbecue sauce recipes simply by Googling around. I have such incredible sauces that I have access to that for me to make my own barbecue sauce doesn't make any sense to me at all. So I don't generally lean that way, but if you want to, you can find it, and it's a matter of 3 or 4 ingredients, and it'll take you maybe an hour or 2. I made it for a cooking class once, and it turned out great. It was really good. And then you could spice it up or spice it down however you want. You can put more cayenne in there, or you can put red pepper flakes, or whatever you want to put in there if you want to spice it up, or you can add more honey and make it sweeter. Whatever you want to do, it's not that difficult. Most barbecue sauces, if you look on the label, let's see. This has, trying to see how many ingredients. Not very many ingredients at all. So I would just Google, and I'd go to a reputable site. You might even search some barbecue sites and just ask around.
Yeah, and I just put the 2 for the slabs and for Plowboy in the chat. So.
Oh, excellent! Thanks.
I just want to grab those and save yourself the time of cooking.
So do they sell the ribs also, and then you just heat them up, or the brisket or whatever?
I know this. I know the slabs does not. I'm not positive about Plavo. You'd have to actually check on their website. But there are places in Kansas City that will, send meat directly to you that all you have to do is heat up.
Yeah.
Jack Stack is one. That's a very famous one. And what's the one that just slipped my mind? Oh, Joe's Kansas City also does a good, online ordering as well.
All right. Okay, and then I'm going to ask a question to the whole crew, because Mary's Lewis Barbecue in Charleston ships as well, because every October, Dad decided to start throwing himself a birthday party, and this is the other reason he's muted. So the birthday party in October, if you're in the wine industry, October is an inconvenient time to have a birthday.
Yeah.
And there's a whole slew of people who have birthdays and anniversaries and all sorts of things to celebrate in October. So they started doing a barbecue. So they fly in barbecue from all over the country, and we have a joint party for everybody who is in the area, who's in the friend group, who has a birthday or a celebration in October. So any other suggestions that anybody else likes from anywhere else, go ahead and take yourself off mute, put them in the chat. We want to hear all about them. And Scott asks, while you guys are commenting on your favorites, for a beginner new to barbecue and smoking, is there a specific cut that you think is easiest to master? Ribs versus brisket, wings, etc.
I'd start with either pork or chicken, because they're the most forgiving and they take the least amount of time. The first thing I ever smoked were chicken thighs, just regular boneless skin-on chicken thighs. And I used a mild wood. I think I used apple. I don't even remember the dry rub I used, just whatever I had around. And I smoked them for about 2 hours maybe. And they were golden brown, and they were absolutely delicious. I would start with those meats, and then once you have conquered that, then you can get more into ribs and brisket, because they're going to take a lot longer. And if you like ham, that's a very easy thing to smoke. If you like the flavor of like a smoked ham, that's very easy. I mean, you just put a little dry rub on it, throw it in the smoker, and pull it out in an hour or two, and it's good to go.
Smoked trout is good too.
Oh, I love smoked trout.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't have it very often because my wife Denise does not like smoked trout, so it's an item that I order when I go out. But yeah, I agree with you. I think trout in particular, because of the nature of its flavors, takes particularly well to smoking. I agree.
All right, we're getting close to 6 o'clock. Does anybody have any other burning questions that we need to ask Dave? Mary?
I'll ask this since it's faster to say it. Dave, have you about, or have you read Franklin Barbecue, a meat smoking manifesto that's done by Aaron Franklin and also Jordan McKay, who is a top wine expert?
I have not, but I'm going to put that on my list.
Yeah, definitely put that on your list. Jordan McKay, I've traveled with him. He's a top wine writer, and he's really, gets into the nitty-gritty of barbecue with Franklin in this book, and I think it's a good resource.
Oh, wow, that sounds neat. I'm going to check that out, Mary. Thank you very much.
You can get it on Amazon.
Awesome.
We're going to have book club in addition to travel.
Yeah, you need more on your plate, Carrie. You definitely.
Well, we actually, it's on the way. I ordered a book that one of my professors from UC Davis came and talked about ampelography and grapevine genetics, and he recommended a book for us called The Vintner's Botanist or something like that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's a great book.
Well, perfect, Mary. You get to lead book club. We'll have book club. It looks like you have a couple books.
See all the books behind me?
Yeah.
Mary, haven't you learned in broadcasting all these years, when you open your mouth, you've actually volunteered for something?
I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that.
Okay, perfect. Because we're going to take a break for harvest, but after harvest in the winter, we'll do book club.
Yeah. Sounds good to me.
We used to all this staying at home and cooking and eating and drinking and reading.
I know this is going to go on a little bit longer, so we have to make the most of it.
Okay, one question. Paul has it, but I also, it's a good question. Beef ribs versus spare ribs.
Right.
How come you never see
What I prefer, or how do they cook differently, or all about?
How come you see more pork ribs? And isn't it St. Louis has the beef style more?
They probably used to. You don't see beef ribs very often, just because I think people are so used to pork ribs these days. I really like I love a beef rib. Jack Stack, who I was telling you about earlier, they do the shipping. They have what's called a crown rib, and it's a beef rib, and it's about, I don't know, 2 inches thick and about 6 inches long. And if you order the dinner, I think you get 3 of them. I've never actually seen anybody finish 3 of those, because they're like the ribs that Fred Flintstone put on the top of his car when he went to the drive-in, and then the car tips over. I don't know if you're too young for that, Carrie, but I think Kathy, you know what I'm talking about.
I'm too young.
They take longer to cook. They cook more like brisket. They take longer to cook, and they're harder to get really tender. But then it's just the availability. I mean, there are a lot of pigs in this country, and so you got a lot of ribs. And most of the people don't really seek out beef ribs. They seek other cuts of beef. For barbecue, obviously, it's the brisket. But I worked at a barbecue restaurant for a year or so, and we had beef ribs for a short period of time, and they were very popular and very delicious. So I would say if you see beef ribs and they're at a good price and you want to give them a shot, go for it. I would, because they're totally different. They taste different. They cook differently. They have a different texture, and it's usually a love it or a hate it kind of experience.
Awesome. All righty. Well, we will let you enjoy the rest of your barbecue. I do want to know how much of that you finished tonight. That's
Well, there are only 3 of us, so my guess is not a whole lot. But I'm looking at Steffi's ribs without a doubt. I want to try those spicy, savory chicken wings, and I got to have some burn ends, because I absolutely love burn ends.
I am so hungry right now.
Huh?
I'm so hungry right now looking at that.
I'm so envious. I wish I could get any of that here. I have to order everything.
Yes, post-COVID field trip. We're all coming to visit you.
Yeah.
That's cool. I will be a very happy and willing host. I will lead you guys all over town to the very best places, and you will eat like kings and queens.
Bring me some grape wood to smoke.
Grape wood. That sounds awesome.
Yeah.
It's actually really good.
It's good.
I like that a lot. Thanks for the offer. I will definitely take you up on that.
Sure.
So
You got a little bit of that lying around, I bet.
A little bit.
Yeah.
So next week we've got Flaherty, the other Dave, will be back, and he is also super fun and entertaining, because we're at this point in happy hour where it's just really all about having a good time. He's producing we're keeping with the television broadcast kind of theme. He's producing a segment called Somlight currently, highlighting different sommeliers in different parts of the industry, and it's really kind of cool, some of the other creative things that are happening right now. So and Dave's a fun guy, so just like this Dave's a fun guy. All the Daves are fun guys right now. So we will see you next week, and in the meantime, enjoy your Syrah. Everybody get some barbecue. Cheers. And if you missed, like I said, I'll post some of these recipes, but if you guys have any other questions, want some follow-up on how to get some barbecue, either get in touch with Dave on Instagram or Facebook.
Yeah, or really, either on Facebook or Instagram. Anybody can follow me at Eats and Drinks with Dave, or send me a friend request, and I'll point you in the right direction, or do the best I can. And I would encourage you, if you really, obviously you guys love food and wine, I do an Instagram live. I had Carrie on a few weeks ago, every Wednesday at 3:30 Pacific, so 5:30 Central, and it changes subjects just like these do every week. And I had some interesting folks on there. I've had some French winemakers and Italian winemakers, and Carrie was on, and some folks from, Mary was on briefly before she had internet issues.
Technical issues.
Technical issues.
You get a repeat. You should come on again.
He's going to come on again. I guarantee it.
Perfect. So, all right, guys. Well, have a great week. Thank you so much, Dave. It's always lovely to see your face.
Lovely to see you and chat with you, and thanks for the invitation. I'm honored.
Well, all right. We'll see you guys all next week.
Okay.
Thanks, guys.
Bye. Cheers.
Thank you. Bye.